This video continues our look at select commands in SQL, and we're going to see two new clauses, a group by clause and a having clause, and they are used when we have queries that involve subgroups of our data. In particular, they're going to allow us to apply an aggregate function to different subgroups of a given table or a given combination of tables. And so if we go back and remind ourselves of what aggregates look like, if I run this query, I'm going to start with my enrolled table, and I don't have a where clause, so I'm going to keep all of the rows, and then I'm just doing count star, so I'm just going to count how many rows are in that table. In this case, there are 6. And so that gives me the total number of rows, but because I'm dealing with the enrolled table, what might be more useful is to be able to figure out how many students are enrolled in each course. And for that, I don't just want a single count, I want a separate count for each course. The way that I do that is by adding a group by clause. Here I'm saying that I want to break up my data into separate groups according to the name of the course, according to this middle column. And then I'm going to get a separate count for each course. In general, a group by clause allows us to group together tuples that have a common value, in this case a common course name, and then we can go ahead and apply an aggregate function to the tuples in each subgroup. And obviously it's going to be more helpful if we know which course is which. To do that, we can come up in our select clause and add course name, and then the result will look like this. So you can see that one subgroup involves the rows in which course name is CS105. There are 3 of those rows, and there are 2 rows in which course name is CS111, and 1 row in which course name is CS460. Now, it may seem odd that we're putting a column name with an aggregate, but you're allowed to do that if you are grouping by that column name. So as long as the column name is in the group by clause, it's okay for it to be in the select clause with an aggregate. Let's trace through this query more closely. The from clause gives us the entire enrolled table as a starting point. There is no where clause in this case, so we keep all of the rows. And then you can picture the group by clause as taking those rows and putting them into subgroups. So you can see we have one subgroup for all tuples in which course name is CS105, a second subgroup in which course name is CS111, and a third subgroup in which course name is CS460. And then we go to the select clause and we get one row for each subgroup, and each of those rows has the name, the course name from that subgroup, coupled with the number of rows in that subgroup. And you can see why it's okay to do this, why it's okay to have an attribute paired with an aggregate, because for every row in a given subgroup, the name is the same, the value of that attribute. And so there's no confusion about which value should be paired with the count. If I were to try to put student ID, there would be confusion because I wouldn't know which of these 3 student IDs should go with the count. So I couldn't put student ID up here since I'm not grouping by student ID. But because I am grouping by course name, there's no ambiguity, and therefore I can go ahead and put that up there with the count. It is possible to have both a where clause and a group by, so you can see I've added one here in which I say I only want the rows in which credit status is equal to ugrad. And when that happens, when you have both of those clauses, the where clause is going to be applied first, then the group by clause. So in this case, we narrow things down to just the rows in which the credit status is ugrad, and then we do the group by. So we end up with only 2 subgroups, and then the select clause gives me a row for each of them with the count for each course. Sometimes we want to apply a condition so that we only get some of the subgroups. So if we go back to our earlier query where we didn't have a where clause and we were getting the number of students enrolled in each course, let's assume that we don't want to worry about courses where the enrollment is 1. Maybe those are independent studies and we just want courses where the enrollment is more than 1. We might be tempted to use a where clause for this purpose, as you see here, but it turns out this does not work. And that's because, as we said earlier, the where clause gets applied before the group by. So the where clause would work on this original full table, and we don't even have the counts at that point. So instead, we're going to use what's called a having clause. And you can see that we have the same condition here, count star greater than 1, but instead of having it in the where clause, we have it in this special having clause. It comes after the group by, and therefore we will have access to these counts, and so the having clause will narrow things down to just the two subgroups whose count is greater than 1. And so whenever you have a condition that involves an aggregate function, you want to put it in the having clause, not in the where clause.